This is a realization that's kind of recent years, that if my dad hadn't gotten shot when I was 14, like I might not even be here to this day. I'd either be dead or in jail. I get to sit down, have a conversation. We get to be real. We get to be raw. We get to share these very, unpolished, very rough around the edges stories that I'm like, hey man, I'm not that much different from you.
Yeah.
And I love that, because I think that at the core is what everybody experiences is, yo dude, like I don't care where you're at in society or how many followers or whatever you think you have or you don't have, at the very base level of it, we're all the same. I would even go to the point where if I could create the poster boy of happiness and like energy, it would be Twitch. Like he would be that guy. So it literally baffled myself as well as everybody in our community. I think things like trauma, things like grief, I think when they come up or when you're reminded of it, for you to still feel something doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. There isn't like, oh, see, you clearly haven't gotten over that yet. There's still more work to be done. I also know that after this gloom and this rain goes away, the sun's coming out again.
This is Rooted Recovery Stories. I'm Patrick Custer, your host, and we are obviously not in our normal set. If you're watching today, we're in Los Angeles filming, and I'm so excited to be sitting here with my friend Ben Chung, who is one of the original members of the Jabbawockeez and current owner of, what is it?
The Kinjaz.
The Kinjaz.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
I have a lot to learn about the dance world, and my producer Aaron is such a fanatic. I literally am learning all the time.
Yeah, all good.
I remember the cultural phenomenon for sure of when you all made such a wave.
Yeah.
It was huge.
Yeah. With the Jabbawockeez, we won a show called America's Best Dance Crew. It was a show on MTV. This was 2008, so it was a while back, and we had no idea what kind of impact that we would have on dance, culture in general. Like it was like a big pop cultural moment, but we just did something that we were doing forever, and it was that right time, right moment, and that show happened, and then we won that TV show, and things just really took off from there.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So I want to mention, being such an accomplished dancer in this world takes so much dedication, diligence, pressure, a lot of things that aren't just necessarily innate. And so I always wonder, in those types of situations, what's the beginning story? Like, let's take it back a little bit, and what are some of the underlying narratives?
Dance was something that I was always a fan of as a kid. When you watch music videos, I was a fan of. I grew up watching MTV when they actually played music videos. When Michael Jackson and MC Hammer, Vanilla Ice even, I would watch these videos and I would see these people dancing, and I was always drawn to it. Never thought that it would be something that I would want to try myself. But I did see that at an early age, I only really tried hard at the things that I found to be interesting and fun. So the first thing was martial arts. So I'm Korean, my parents put me in Taekwondo when I was a kid, and I loved it. And then shortly after that was skateboarding. So I was like, oh, I'm going to be a professional skateboarder someday. And so I really was, pouring myself into skateboarding. And then the one that came after that was dance. And dance was the one that ended up sticking around the longest. And I think a big part of that, even when I think about it now, is the community that I found in dance. Because, in skateboarding, I did have a group of friends, but during this time, that wasn't the best influence in my life with the friends that I was hanging with. And my mom actually was the one who pulled me out of that, group, because, I was this is when I was in middle school. She pulled me out of school and sent me to a whole other school just to get me away from these kids. So my mom did the most to try to get me away from skateboarding. And then when I found dance, It was a different type of community, much more positive, much more, less likely to get into trouble type of stuff. And it was kind of like, yeah, we're just dancing all the time. So my mom kind of let me do that. And then, and I really found this like community of people who are, not only trying to become really good at their craft of dance, but also building things and shows and just kind of doing things out in the space that I was like very curious about. And that was kind of how it started. And I never thought that there was a career to be made out of it. It was just something that I loved. And then once I found myself like after college, the curiosity of whether I can pursue it professionally, because I would watch these music videos. I'm like, hey, there's a bunch of dancers in these videos. I see, tours and concerts. I'm like, there's all these dancers on stage. I wonder if I could do that. Mm-hmm. And then, it was just like, well, there's no way to find out unless you give it a try. And so I just kind of went for it and figured it out. And fast forward, I've been in it now for over 20 years and still doing it to this day. I love it,
That's amazing. I think that to take that story even further, what I was referring to, and I love that you flushed that out so beautifully, underlying that is a tenacity that brought you to the point to be able to be as successful and do what you've done, without which you wouldn't have gone to the places that you've gone, and be where you are today. So going back to, we talk about a lot of, and on this show, recovering life from many different angles. Life happens, it hits us, whether it's mental health trauma, dysfunctional family systems. There's so many things that take place that begin to steal life away from us. We were talking about themes, and I kind of want to, I just want to rip the Band-Aid off.
Yeah. I love that.
When asked about the biggest thing that happened to you as a young person, how do you explain that to somebody?
Yeah, there are definitely a few sort of hinge moments in my life that I feel like kind of shaped like my life trajectory. I guess I'll have to start at the first one. This happened when I was 14 years old. My dad, who was a store owner, he was robbed at gunpoint one night and he was shot point blank in the head. And we received the news in the middle of the night. We just got a phone call that my mom, I heard from my bedroom, I heard my mom pick up the phone. I just hear all this hysteria, and I woke up to find out what was going on, and found out that he got shot. And so my mom and I drove up in the middle of the night to a hospital up in Fresno, which was where my dad was, where he was. And we got the news from the doctor that he was shot in the head, and he just gave us all the cold hard, here's what we're looking at. Doesn't look good. Probably not going to survive. If he does, he's going to be a vegetable at best. And, I'm 14 and I'm just, I'm crying, I'm scared, and I didn't know what to make of it. And then, my mom, who was just oddly so confident that he was going to be okay. Like, I don't even remember her crying at the moment. She was just like, nope, he's going to be fine. We're going to pray and he's going to survive and he's going to be fine. And I was just looking at her as this like, okay, I'd rather believe this than what this doctor is saying. Fast forward, turns out that she was right and he did end up surviving. And not only did he survive, he actually recovered physically and mentally, like way beyond what the doctors were saying was even medically possible. Because, wow. I mean, he was shot like right here and the bullet was still lodged in his head. They said that they didn't remove the bullet because it would have done more damage to remove it.
For the listener, Ben, he's pointing right in the middle of
right
his,
here,
right in the middle of his forehead.
Wow. And so when he survived, I thought that was one, impossible. So two, how is this possible? He's here. So, I was raised in a Christian home, and this was the first time that I actually felt that God actually intervened in a real sort of tangible way. Mm-hmm. And that was where it kind of opened me up to this journey with finding what that actually meant. And it took years, you know, so I'm in ninth grade. This is my freshman year of high school. I was very like far removed from church at this time, though growing up into it, but I just didn't like the whole church culture, which is a whole other conversation. But now that I was experiencing God, I was like, I have to find out what this means. Like, okay, God, if you're real, what am I supposed to do now? You know? So yeah, I think at that point I was now, and had that not happened, if my dad didn't get shot prior to the way that I was living, I was going a very different path, you know. And, you know, my dad was a very, not the best role model, you know, for lack of a better term, not the best husband, not the best father, abusive in a lot of ways. I learned I learned my temper, I learned anger, I learned violence from him. So take all of that to just even my, I don't know, I guess temperament as a person, like I learn and then I go do, you know. And so I was very attracted to gang culture during those, you know, years, and I'm in middle school. So this is kind of, you know, a boy's kind of in his teenage years looking for some validation, looking for some like, who am I sort of thing. And then when you get the validation from the people that like, you know, that may be kind of in the same, cut from the same cloth, but they're like, hey, we can all protect each other and we got each other's back and all that. That seemed attractive to me. So I was kind of going that route, you know. So this is a realization that's kind of recent years, that if my dad hadn't gotten shot when I was 14, like I might not even be here to this day. I'd either be dead or in jail. So that was actually a weird thing to say. Like one of the best things that ever happened to me was that. That probably saved my life. And, you know, I would have never thought that it would have been dance, and I would have never thought I would have been a part of some of the most influential, impactful things in like dance culture, pop culture, to be a part of, you know, arguably two of the biggest, you know, dance crews that have, you know, made impact in culture. But it was that turning point that kind of just set things up to get to where I'm at today.
When you talk about a turning point, and you briefly touched on it, I'd be interested to hear the compare contrast between what your dad was like and your home life with him as a primary caregiver prior to getting shot versus how it changed after his recovery.
Yeah. You know, so even with that being, you would think that he's the primary sort of like head of the household, breadwinner, like, you know, and I'm Korean, and so, you know, that sort of like nuclear family model that's like the American dream. That's why my parents immigrated from Korea to here to sort of create. Man is supposed to go, you know, work and take care of his family. But it was very like flipped upside down in my house. It was like front facing. You would think that's because that was what was projected to people, my parents' friend group, to people at their church, things like that. But I lived in my home, so I knew what was actually happening. Yeah. And like my mom was mainly the breadwinner. My mom was the one who was kind of keeping things from falling apart, but also to not make my dad look a certain way. She would sort of like set him up to look like he's the guy. And so that also was like a very interesting thing for me to witness. And it felt like a lot of what was going on felt like, I guess this is what life is. You just put up a facade so that things look a certain type of way, but behind the scenes, they're very different. So then I also learned that like, you learn how to fake it. You learn how to like, to do what you need to do so that you can make everyone else think that this is what this is. So even with that, I learned that like, oh, he's not really this guy that he paints himself to be. So there was a lot of that where I'm like, this is all fake. Like, I don't trust even my own parents. And that did something to me. But after he got shot, like I said, he was, you know, a very angry person and things like that, which he actually still had some of that, which was interesting. But one of the biggest things that I saw that I took notice of right away was his expression of his own faith. Because prior to the accident, though we would go to church together on Sundays, that was the extent of it. We would go to church, he would put on his suit, put on his nice Rolex, roll up in our Benz, and like drop, big offering in the offering plate, and smile, shake hands, come home. And on the way home, my parents would be yelling at each other, fighting. And I was just like, yeah, well, that's life. Like, I guess this is how it is. So again, I didn't know the difference of anything until, after, this is when he's recovered, not fully. He still had brain damage. So there was, I would say his mental recovery maybe got to the point of maybe of like a 4 or 5 year old in terms of he can walk, talk, physically function that seemingly normal. Yet there were things like he didn't retain his short-term memory, didn't have like sort of normal adult logic and behavior. And, but I would see him at our kitchen table every day with his Bible wide open, and then had a notebook, and he's just literally transcribing the Bible. Like, he would look at it and he would just be writing it down. And I'm like, what are you doing? And I didn't know what was happening, and I didn't know how much of it he was retaining, but for whatever reason, he was just writing the Bible, and I would just see his head down praying. And that was a huge thing for me, because I'm like, I've never seen my dad crack open the Bible once in my life prior to this. And here he is every single day. No one's telling him to do it. He's just doing it. And so I thought, I'm like, wow, I think God is somehow like real to him now. I don't know what's really registering, in his head, but I definitely see him doing things now that I've never seen him do before. And that also showed me like, I think like God's like really real, because I'm like.
So not only did you witness a miracle, but you witnessed a behavioral change in someone that you didn't think was possible.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Which is a miracle in and of itself.
Yeah, it was. And I think that was where it drew me even deeper to explore. And I started to see that though there was a lot of pain. I mean, it's been years of packing away pain that I didn't even realize I was packing away. And I think, because I'm also a very like passionate person. I pour myself into things. I care very deeply about people. And, when I think about even my career path and dance, and I mentioned earlier, like, I think it was the communal aspect of dance, because I'm like now on these dance teams where we're literally like blood, sweat, tears, late nights, like breaking our bodies down to just put together a 4-minute show that we're going to perform one night, but we're putting months and months of practice into it. We're not getting paid for this. Like, we're literally doing this for free. So then why do it? It's because of the community. And when I really boil it down, I think what my like the core of my being is I care about people and their experiences. And I've learned that dance in the last now 20 plus years that I've been doing it, even at the level that I've been doing it, and with the platform that it's given me access to people. And that access to people is the thing that I value the most. And so when I even discovered things like podcasting for myself, like I have a show that I'm like, I love the fact that I have such access to people. And then, when I get to sit down and have a conversation, we get to be real, we get to be raw, we get to share these very, unpolished, very rough around the edges stories that I'm like, hey man, I'm not that much different from you.
Yeah.
And I love that, because I think that at the core is what everybody experiences is, yo, dude, like, I don't care where you're at in society or how many followers or whatever you think you have or you don't have, at the very base level of it, we're all the same.
I think that's one of the most beautiful things that came out of COVID. This podcast as well. COVID podcasts obviously existed before COVID, but many of them popped up subsequently.
Sure.
And one of the beautiful things about the medium of a podcast is that you were referencing the power of telling a story.
Yeah.
And for somebody to be able to identify with the struggle of another human being, it's a conversation that's not necessarily reciprocal, because you're not there having two-way communication with each other, but the passing of the information and the life-changing and the life-changing, life-saving, life-giving story so much of the time it's literally passed on through
Totally.
megabytes.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's so cool. And it's one of the things that keeps me going, doing this. I love it so much.
Same.
In your podcast, Good Service, is centered around you and your co-host,
Kevin Saw. Yep.
who sit and y'all share a meal at a local restaurant, right?
Well, we get the food from a local restaurant,
Okay.
but we bring it to our recording, which
Nice.
is we record at a loft.
You gotta have, you gotta have a little bit of a sound controlled area.
Yeah, for sure. It's tough at a public place, but yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. And so tell me a little bit more about it.
So speaking of COVID project, that was what it was for us. You know, Kevin and I met through COVID, and we became good friends. And we had entertained doing something together. We didn't know that it was going to be a podcast. We're just like, hey, we run in like different industries, yet it's like around entertainment. We find ourselves at the same events. And, though both of us kind of being from the entertainment like industry, whenever we would talk, it was always like we would talk about all the projects and all the cool, fun things that we're doing, but it would always come back to like our relationship with God and how we're doing spiritually. And I'm like, why do we always find ourselves there? Well, like, I guess that's what we really care about. So then when we entertained the idea of doing something, we're like, man, like, it'd be fun to just like sit down and do something with food, because he and I always connect over meals, and we're like, man, let's just sit down, let's break bread, let's like hit up these like cool, local small businesses so we can highlight our local businesses, and let's just have talks about like what's going on in our lives. And then it could be everything from what we're experiencing in our work life, but also like how all of that culminates back to like how you doing with all that, And so again, these faith conversations kind of naturally come up. And so what Good Service ended up being was, literally us having a sit down conversation around some food. And we bring in other people from different spheres that are from various industries, whether that be entertainment, business, tech, finance, whatever. And then people who are also in like traditional ministry and things like that. And we have these conversations that are very raw. And we really wanted the space that we create to be safe, in that you don't have to come here with this like, oh, is this this type of show, so I better come prepared with that kind of material. We're like, no, there is no material to prepare. The only material we want is you authentically, honestly yourself. And we've had people come on like openly talk about like, yeah, I'm not really sure where I'm at with God these days. We're like, that's awesome. Let's talk about that, and that's the journey of it. And so, so like Good Service is like, obviously we go to these restaurants because they provide good food and good service. And that's why we keep coming back. And we wanted that to be a space here also where we do that, but also to tap into everybody's individual good service, like what it means for you to provide a good service to the spheres that you are running in and things like that. So that's pretty much what the show is. And we're almost a year old now, and it's been a really fun journey.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, let's just go into this next section of talking about grief and loss. You experienced quite a bit in your life, and some a major episode somewhat recently. You lost one of your best friends, and so there's no easy way to launch into that.
Yeah,
but,
I mean, obviously I'm wearing headphones, so like hear you take this like deep breath. You're like, as soon as Patrick says that, so like before you talk about what happens, like even just having that come up, like what do you actually feel like right now?
How do I feel right now?
Yeah, like what did that deep breath, like what if you had to like put an emotion to?
Yeah, that's a great question. The power of a sigh, right? I don't know. You don't even know where it's coming from. When I guess if I'm gonna in real time unpack like what that sigh means, it's it's confusion. It's a bit of an unsettled. I don't have an answer for this in a like, well, here's how I've dealt with that. It's like, I am still dealing. I am still, I have so many questions. Nothing satisfies that part because it's just this I don't know how to answer that, which I think I'm also learning. That's okay. I don't need to answer it. I don't need to have this nice bow that I can package on that one, and now I can put that on the shelf. It's like, yo, that's an open box. It's gonna always stay open.
Right.
And I think that's also a big part of grieving, is that I'm learning that, and I've met a handful of people over the past few years that are grieving the loss of loved ones from things like suicide, that, people say like, hey, I don't think I'm ever going to get over that. Like, it's going to be a forever process of grieving, because we think that healing is like okay, that one's done. That one,
we think it's linear.
Right. Like, that one's done. We can now moving on that. And I'm over that. That can never hurt me again. I think things like trauma, things like grief, I think when they come up, or when you're reminded of it, for you to still feel something doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. There isn't like, oh, see, you clearly haven't gotten over that yet. There's still more work to be done. Maybe there is work to be done, but that's a work that maybe we have to be okay with. That's a work that's never going to be finished. Right. That's a work that we're going to always have to work on. So yeah, that sigh, I would say, is something that, I don't have any clear answers for. It still hurts, and it still grieves me. Yet I know that the choice that I make is to move on, and it's to keep living, and it's to honor the memory of what we're talking about, Steven Twitch Boss. He and I weren't like super, super close, but he was a good friend that I've known through the dance community. We both came up in the same scene together. This is before he did any of the movies, before, the Step Ups and, Magic Mikes, and then him being the resident DJ on the Ellen DeGeneres show. Like, this is before all that. We were in dance crews. We would session together. We would battle against each other. We would see each other at the same events. We would take classes from one another. Like, it was that was the level of our friendship. And then, obviously when his career started to take off, the thing that really made it tough for myself, as well as so many people within the dance community, we looked at Twitch as like he was the one of us that made it. Yeah. He was the one that broke out of the scene of just the community. And not to say that there's anything wrong with the community scene, but it was like, when we're looking at Twitch, it's like, that's the dream. Like, Twitch is doing it, and we were so proud of him. And never through any of that, when we would see him after all the success, was he any different from the day one Twitch that we knew. He was the same dude, bright smile, always elevating people, always encouraging people, giving people opportunities that if he can like vouch for, like, he brought so many dancers onto the Ellen show because he was like, Ellen, you need to check out this person or this group. Like, he was a big champion for dance. And we're like, dude, that's what's up, man. Like, you're just day one, the same dude, So Twitch was always that guy for us, and we're always going to remember him for that.
This podcast is brought to you by Promises Behavioral Health. If you or a loved one are struggling with trauma, addiction, or mental health, we are ready to answer your questions and help you take that next step. Call our admission center at 888-648-4098. Or visit us online at www.promises.com. Our team is ready and waiting to answer the call for help.
When talking about grief and loss, from your perspective, suicide is one of those things that touches literally everyone in its orbit. I want to know what was that like for you when you got the news?
Yeah. I was in disbelief at first. I thought that there was some sort of misinformation, so I was like, nah, that's a rumor. Let's wait to find out more. And so, disbelief was the first reaction. Part of the disbelief was because I literally had spoken to him 2 days before this news came out. And we were just texting, and he and I were supposed to hop on a phone call that Monday. So I had spoken to him on the weekend, which was a Saturday, And we were supposed to talk about this project that I had in mind that I thought he'd be great for. He seemed really excited for it. He's like, man, this sounds great. Let's talk on Monday. I'm celebrating my wedding anniversary this weekend. I'm like, yeah, man, celebrate, have your fun, like to hit me up whenever, you know? And so we scheduled a call for Monday. Monday rolled around. I shot him a text. I didn't hear anything back. So I'm like, okay, he's probably busy. And then 2 days later, which was, I think it was a Wednesday, that was when the news came out. And so a big part of my disbelief, I was like, no, I just talked to him. Like, what are you talking about? You know, we literally talked 2 days ago. And so, you know, as more stuff started coming out, more news and all this other stuff, unfortunately, like I wasn't on a meeting when all this stuff was happening. And, and then I just broke down crying, and I was just like, I didn't know like how else to respond. And the tears just kept coming throughout the day, throughout the week. And this was the first time, for one, that I had lost anybody that I knew to suicide. So, again, I don't know how to deal with that. And then especially when, you know, now I'm seeing, myself included, but I'm hearing from all my other friends, everyone's trying to make sense of like, yo, did you like, was there any sign? Was there like anything? Like, we're just trying to find something to make something make sense. And literally not one person said anything that was anything remotely alluding to something like this that could have happened. Because Twitch was, again, going back to, he was the dude who had the biggest smile in the room, always trying to elevate people, always dancing. And like, you know, like you would just think that, man, if I would even go to the point where if I could like, you know, create the poster boy of happiness and like energy, it would be Twitch. Like he would be that guy. So it literally baffled, you know, myself as well as everybody in our community. And so, you know, and then of course, as the weeks go by, you're seeing all this social media stuff. And at some point I had to kind of just turn my mind off of it, because it was just, you know, you start hearing all these speculations of like, oh, I think I heard this. And it's like, man, I don't even want to hear that, dude. Like, cause now we're almost turning this thing, and I don't think people are doing it intentionally, but it's like, how are we honoring this man's life by all these speculative things? I think we'll just have to kind of chalk it up to like, hey, we just don't know. Right. We're going to miss him, and we love him, and we love the legacy that he's left us all with. And, you know, for me, I was just like, man, I'm praying for his wife that he's left behind, his kids that he's left behind. And, shout out to Allison. And, you know, I'm starting to see, you know, in this last year, she's been more vocal and seems to kind of be okay with being out there a little bit more. I know that they have a book that they just were planning to release as a family that is now out. So, yeah, I don't know. Like, there isn't any buttoned up way for me to answer this question of like how I've dealt with it. I guess going back to that sigh, I was like, I don't know how to answer this other than it's a process that I think I'm still gonna have to unpack. It
is. And the stages of grief are, most people don't go through them in order. And most of the time we hover in between a couple, you know, maybe go back and revisit one. You know, bargaining is a big one. And grief as it relates to suicide of another individual is there's so many layers, because the bargaining, the denial, the questions that so many people ask of, was there something I didn't see? Was there something I could have done? Mm-hmm. And can we make the need to feel like we can achieve an ability to make sense of it all at some point? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Getting to a place where you have to let go and say, we won't know.
Yeah.
there's no arrival other than that in most cases. Now, in some, there's obviously, more information to be had. But being able to get to a place for you, as you expressed, like, it sounds like the freedom for you was getting to a place where you have to let go and just say, I'm not going to know the answers.
Yeah.
It still hurts. It's going to continue hurting.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's it. That also is a choice. It's a decision, and not to minimize it to sort of like a agree to disagree kind of thing, like people will be like, yeah, well, you don't always have to agree with something for you to be able to move on from it. I do think that there is something to be learned to let go of something that feels uncomfortable to let go of, because I do think that life is meant to be lived forward. And the more we hold on to things that we will never get an answer for, it's not that the more I hold on to this thing, eventually something's going to make sense about it. Like, no, there's no guarantee of that. And I think, we have only so much bandwidth in terms of emotional bandwidth, mental bandwidth, even like what we want to allow our thoughts to just, what takes real estate in our minds. Like, is that going to do me better for me to just constantly mull over something that I know I'm not going to answer? And I think it's healthier, though it takes time. Everybody has a different process of when they feel they can move on from something. And I think it's such a big piece to this that I would want for people to put more focus on is the power of grace, like giving yourself grace, even when you resort backwards. I think it's so hard because we're so like in our culture too, it's forward movement. Don't ever look back. Don't ever look back. And then what if you look back? What if you, in a moment of weakness, call it, that you look back? Like, is that okay? Like, yes, it's okay. Like, give grace to yourself to like, okay, in that moment, because you're human, it's okay for you to like be reminded of something and feel sad about it again, even cry about it again. Let yourself embrace that and be okay with that moment, and then decide, okay, cool, let's keep going. And I think there's a big thing there where, we're in this, place of, especially coming out of something so jarring like a global pandemic, where we lost in every category we've experienced of life, of relationships, of careers, of finances, identity. Like, people are struggling in all kinds of ways. We are now like, okay, how do we get out of that? And we have to have grace on ourselves to even, we're not fully healed of all this stuff that we've been through in these recent times. And so, that's why I love what you're doing, and I love what this show represents. I love these conversations, because I think when you hear people talk about it, and you can see that everybody feels and everybody struggles, and it gives you permission to give grace to yourself when you know that someone else is also working on giving grace to themselves. So I think, with that, this is like something that I feel like it's always going to be a soft spot. But the choice is to do my best to keep moving forward. And then when I'm reminded, it's okay. Be reminded, and then keep going.
I think it's interesting when you see, and I don't want to speak for you, but when we talk about moving forward, there's elements of that what I hear you saying, and I definitely agree with, is that, giving yourself the permission to, when needed, live in the memory of the person in question, right? Maybe feel sorrow when it comes up, but moving forward, meaning not sitting in the space that is arresting you in this impossible, like almost paralysis of just feeling like you have got to figure out what it's a vacuum, a circle that you just keep circling over and over and over of what is it, what could have been, all these things that you won't find the answer. When we talk about moving on, it's the freedom of moving on from that, because you're never going to have control over that situation.
Yeah.
You're never going to, it's not something that, there are so many questions left unanswered, in that realm. And I think one of the most important, suicide is also so difficult because it is, there are statistically, there are a lot of numbers that talk about how it's, one of those things it's very contagious. Mm-hmm. So if someone commits suicide around, that's close to or in your orbit, the statistically speaking, your chances increase of being someone that will experience higher levels of depression, anxiety, or one of the major mental health issues that contribute to someone attempting to take their own life. It's one of the biggest reasons that I think it's important that the conversation around what you're doing, talking about the fact that you had a friend close to you that this happened to and what it was like for you and what you did afterwards is so important, because I think that for all of us, like, you live long enough, you're going to have someone close to you take their life. And it's devastating. Yeah. It takes the breath out of you. I mean, like, it just in a way that you've never felt before, and it is a type of loss that is unlike any other. And so I do think it's so important that we have these conversations, in the interest of people feeling less alone. Yeah. Along those lines, so we're talking about grief and loss. There's also a dynamic of attachment. We live in a society where we're meant to be, there's a certain element of codependency, not codependency in the sense that we talk about in a negative way, but we are dependent on each other in a societal in community, right? And so when something like this happens, it's only natural that as human beings, we start to question whether or not this is going to happen again to other people, and fear the loss and abandonment of what happens if this takes place again. And all that anxiety and energy has got to go somewhere. It's going to go somewhere. Yeah. So if we don't have these conversations, if we don't talk about it, if we don't talk about what does healthy coping, and you mentioned earlier, and we said, well, there's no arrival. Sometimes though, the arrival is understanding there's no end point. That healing isn't linear, that it goes up and down, back and forth. You're gonna have good days and bad days. The energy is going to be there, but that vulnerability is important. That staying connected to other human beings is important. That using this as an example of the importance of recognizing and dealing with your own mental health on a regular basis is so imperative. To encapsulate everything that I just said, I'm interested to know, how have you coped, and how are you coping now?
Yeah, I think how I have is continuing on in the ways that I know are good for me. And I don't want to go into all the chicken soup for the soul type of talk,
throwback.
I know, right? I'm aging myself here, but there is truth to healthy rhythms. Going back to, working out. If you work out as a lifestyle, you're going to see the benefits of working out as a lifestyle. If you choose to seasonally work out or seasonally eat healthy, you're not going to really see much that you see as my life looks this way and feels this way, because it's so sporadic, because your choice in engaging in these rhythms is sporadic. So for me, let's talk about the stuff that is we all agree that health, mental and emotional, comes from how you physically feel. If you physically feel lethargic, if you physically feel like you're in pain, that's going to affect your mental and emotional also. Like when you just can't get up and physically feel okay, you're going to now think that everything else also sucks a little bit more.
Yeah.
Like I'm actually hurting. Like my legs hurt, my knees hurt. Like I'm out of breath if I walk up these stairs. I'm like, man, I don't want to walk upstairs anymore because like I can't breathe. You know what I mean? So like there's so much that we can help. And I always go back to, well, I at least know I can get out and go for a run right now. No one's stopping me other than my own will, you know? So I do the very like, what's the lowest hanging fruit of things that I know I absolutely have control over. And that's like, be physically active, you know, like, and man, during COVID, speaking of, you know, I'm an extrovert, man. So I thrive around the energy of other people. So when we are locked down, I was like, am I going to go crazy?
Oh,
you
yeah.
know?
Yeah,
like I was really
here.
afraid of that. And so, you know, not being able to hang out with my normal community, I was like, I at least can't be cooped up at home all day. So then what I was doing was I would just go for these runs by myself, and I would just go out to the park. I would run the streets of LA, and I would run for miles on end. And mind you, I wasn't a runner by any means. I was just like, I need to get out of the house. And then once I started doing that, I'm like in parks, I'm seeing just like the beautiful, and you know, this is during the time where people weren't driving. So the skies were clear in LA. So it's just like, wow, the skies are blue. And you know, like there's so much that I was able to enjoy and appreciate in the midst of this global pandemic. And I think there's something there too, where, you know, when something seems so grim, like a pandemic where there's lockdown, there's a ton of uncertainty, all this stuff that seems like, man, the world is going to hell right now. Is there anything good that's in the midst of that? Absolutely there is. You just got to go out and find it.
Yeah.
And that's what I think I really saw for myself was I don't like this, like what's happening, but I think there's something that I can personally do to make, you know, make some lemonade out of these lemons right now. And so the physical side of things is stuff that like I continue to do, that I do to cope. And like, you know, these runs, so I became an avid runner through COVID now, and I did a half marathon in 2021, which I never thought I would do. And then I was like, I wonder if I could do a full marathon. And I did a full marathon in October of last year, and I'm about to do another half marathon in a month or in 2 months. So like I love running.
That's so great.
And every morning when I go out for these runs, and I'm just like, there's always this moment in my run, because I don't run with people, I'm by myself, and oftentimes it's just quiet and it's just, you know, very serene and things like that. And there are these moments where I'm like almost forced to, not by any external force, but like my mind just goes there. And I think, and this may sound kind of morbid, but like it's a really good thing. I think to myself, I don't know how many more of these I have left. I don't know how many more morning runs I have. I don't know how many days that my legs are going to feel good enough for me to be able to go out and run on these legs. So this is the best thing right now, is this, because you don't know how many more you have. And I think about people that I've lost. And like literally I opened up Instagram this morning, and my friend is posting about one of his friends that just passed away, young guy. And I saw that right before I went on my run. So as I'm running, I'm thinking about this. I'm like, God, that could have been me. This dude, for all I know, is probably even younger than I am. I don't know what he passed away from. But we think that like, oh, that'll never be me. I'm going to live forever. I'm going to be one of those guys who lives until whatever, he's 100 and dies in his sleep. But like, you just don't know. So any moment that I have to like experience something physically that I can do, I'm like, man, just enjoy the crap out of that, because you don't know how many you have left, and you're doing something healthy for your body. So there's so many psychological things that are happening. You're making your body healthy. You're pushing yourself. You're huffing and puffing, but you're living life right now. Like you're pushing yourself to the limit, where you know that if you keep doing that, you elevate. So I would say like what I'm doing on a very base level is being physically healthy. And then outside of that, like on a spiritual level, like again, my relationship with God is the core of everything that I am. So that's always my like measuring stick. That's always my like, thermostat. Like, it's like, this has to regulate everything else going on around me, like regulate the temperature of this room by that being the core of everything. And also the things that like I don't have control over, just got to accept, like, I don't know, like, and like I can still be reminded, like, I'm very affected by the weather. That's why I think I choose to live in LA, because we just have the best weather all year round. But the few
except
days
for June.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I'm not a big fan of heat, but it does get hot out here. But I don't like gloomy and rainy weather. So there are days where it's like gloomy and rainy for a few days, and I'm just at home. I'm just like, I'm kind of sad now today. You know what I mean? Like, and I think that that's okay, because I also know that after this gloom and this rain goes away, the sun's coming out again. So then it makes me appreciate those sunny days even more when I get to sit through those gloomy days. And I know that that's how life ebbs and flows. It's not this, like you said, it's not linear, always this. It's not always anything. It goes up and down. But I think when you learn how to ride with those ebbs and flows, it also gives you the ability to appreciate and like really embrace those high moments. And whenever you can, share it with people, whether that's with an actual sit down conversation, in person, or share it on social media,
1000%. And as I sit here and listen to you talking, you talk about the physical, the spiritual, and from the mental health perspective, the themes that I hear you saying at the base level are letting go, right? Because you get to a place where every day you realize I don't have control over all the things that I think or want to have control over, that I can't make sense of, or I can't prevent from happening, or I can't this, I can't that. When you fully relinquish the control, and then this like other side of it, you're talking about, whether you want to call it a YOLO mentality, living life to the fullest. What it truly is in every moment, living a life of gratitude. So if we can let go of truly the essence of, taking from the prayer we pray in the 12-step communities all the time, the things I cannot control, and stay in a place of gratitude, I think we find the ability to live in the present, which is actually being able to ride the true wave. You're not moving against things. You're not living in the past. You're not shoving yourself into the future, which is fear and anxiety. And what an awesome balance. I think that everybody can take pieces of this into their life.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you hit it.
You hit it. But man, thank you so much. This has been such an amazing conversation. I want to ask you, like, can you share anything about, you are a living art form, and I'm really excited to hear if there's anything coming up for you that you want to talk about, over this next year. I am currently, in a transitional exploration phase. I think the last, 20 so years of my life has been very much focused on pursuing my professional dance career. And dance is always going to be a part of my life. I think that's going to just be in my blood, in my bones, into the day that I can't do it physically anymore. But with that, I've been very curious, and my curiosity has led me to pursuing different avenues to explore what dance looks like without me having to actually be the one on stage and be the one in front of the camera. And so I am working on a few projects right now that I'm producing to create content around dance. And so nothing that is officially out and front facing, ready for the public, but I am working on some of those things behind the scenes right now. And on my own like personal journey,
The podcast, I've been loving the podcast journey in the space. So Good Service is the podcast that I'm super excited about. So that's been a growing show. And to go even more personal with just me, I've started the process of exploring what it looks like to write a book, and I feel like I've experienced a lot of things that I've learned that not a lot of people have experienced in the unique way that I have. And, learning how to turn a dream that was simply what I defined as something that was fun for me, that I realized that fun actually meant passion, and that passion actually led me to finding purpose. And then purpose is literally the thing that makes life worth living, is that you're living into your purpose. And so I've learned to harness that story of passion and purpose and how that's changed at least my world. And with that, as an entrepreneur, as a dancer, as somebody who's, chasing something in the creative field, there is no blueprint for how to necessarily do that and make it like a livelihood. So I've been entrepreneurial my whole life, like been very scrappy about like, how do I make this work? And how am I going to like put food on my table by doing this? And there's something with the power of just starting, and you never know what something can be if you don't start it. And I think, analysis paralysis is one of the most dangerous things, from like you not knowing what your potential could have been because you just never tried. So, and if you choose to try and you start something, and being that person who has a purpose, being able to be scrappy and figure things out, you will find how to make it work. And that's how I've been able to build my career as a dancer. And now, as a storyteller in podcasting, and now all of that, I'm like, I want to package all of that, put that into a book. And, again, I really enjoy the talking space. So you better believe there's an audiobook that's going to be coming right after that.
Yeah.
And I'm also learning that I enjoy sharing this knowledge with people. So I want to enter into more public speaking and engage with people who are curious about what that looks like. And I think my story resonates a lot with sort of that young adult, sort of like I just kind of getting out of college and trying to figure out what to do with my life, and scared to venture into, untapped territory. I'm like, hey, let's talk, because my whole life's been that,
Yeah.
So those are a few of the things that I'm looking forward to right now.
That's great. I love it. Well, I love that you voiced that, a big person believing in words and manifesting. So I'm putting support behind all that for you. And I hope all those things come through for you.
Appreciate that.
Thank you so much for sharing your story, your vulnerability, and allowing us to do it on this medium.
Love it.
Yeah.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
You bet. And to each of you that are listening and watching, remind you, as we always do in closing out, that it is never too late to start loving yourself, and you're always only ever one decision away from a completely different life.
This podcast is brought to you by Promises Behavioral Health. If you or a loved one are struggling with trauma, addiction, or mental health, we are ready to answer your questions and help you take that next step. Call our admission center at 888-648-4098 or visit us online at www.promises.com. Our team is ready and waiting to answer the call for help.